We've been going through the women in the Bible this whole summer, and this morning we come to Deborah. So I'm going to be reading from the book of Judges, and there are two chapters that talk about Deborah. It's told first in the prose form in chapter 4, and then it's told in poem form, the same thing, in chapter 5. I'm not going to take you through all of those books, all those verses, but I'm going to read selectively from them. And by the way, the poem in chapter 5 is one of the oldest texts in the Bible. People figure that it was written in the 11th century BCE and by someone who was actually very close to the events that are described in it, so that's kind of cool. So starting with chapter 4. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord sold them into the hand of the king of Canaan. The commander of his army was Sisera. And then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help, for Sisera had 900 chariots of iron and had oppressed the Israelites cruelly for 20 years. At that time, Deborah, a prophet, a woman of Lapidoth, was judging Israel. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah in the hill country, and the Israelites would come up to her for judgment. She sent and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take position at Mount Tabor, bringing 10,000 from the tribe of Naphtali and the tribe of Zebulun, and I will draw out Sisera, the general, to meet you by the Wadi Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand." Barak said to her, "I'll go with you if you go with me. If you do not go with me, I will not go." And she said, "Surely I will go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." And then Deborah got up and went with Barak to Kadesh, and 10,000 warriors went up behind them. And when Sisera was told that Barak the son of Abinoam had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera called out all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the troops that were with him. And Deborah said to Barak, "Up, for this is the day on which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. The Lord is indeed going out before you." So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 warriors following him. And the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and all his army into a panic before Barak. Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot, while Barak pursued the chariots and the army. And all the army of Sisera fell by the sword, and no one was left. And this is the poem from chapter 5. Then Deborah and Barak son of Abinoam sang on that day, saying, "Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. To the Lord I will sing. I will make melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Awake, awake, Deborah. Awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, O son of Abinoam." And then down marched the remnant of the noble. The people of the Lord marched down for him against the mighty. The kings came, they fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan at Taanach by the waters of Megiddo. And the stars fought from heaven. From their courses they swept and fought along Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. The onrushing torrent, the torrent of Kishon, march on my soul with might. So perish all your enemies, O Lord, but may your friends be like the sun as it rises in its might. And the land had rest for 40 years. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks. It's a long word. Well, it's been one of those summers. Up north to the lake for the 4th of July, out to southwestern Minnesota for a family reunion, up north again for a family reunion, this time with the Sibs, and then up north again for another reunion, this time with the kids. Lots of toing and froing, lots of family gatherings and lots of storytelling, lots of laughter and celebrations. And it all works. We get along. But each time John and I set out, we give ourselves the warning. Don't talk about politics. Of course, it's a good idea in general to take a break from all of the political drama. But the warning has its practical side as well. It keeps the peace. Politics and big family gatherings can be a volatile mix, especially in these polarized days. Better just to keep politics out of it. Some people feel that way about religion, too. Keep politics out of it. The Founding Fathers separated church and state for a reason. And we've gotten a good lesson in the wisdom of that decision over the past 30 years, eh? Too many people wrap themselves not just in the flag, but also in the Bible, and use both as weapons of oppression. So keep politics out of religion and just stick to the Bible, right? Well, except then we would have to excise the crucifixion from the New Testament, because it was a political entity that killed Jesus, the Roman Empire. And he was killed for political reasons, to keep the Jews from revolting against the empire, which they actually did rather disastrously some decades later. Biblical scholar John Dominic Crossan has said that retelling the story of Jesus without politics would be like writing a biography of Abraham Lincoln and leaving out that business with the Civil War. Politics isn't defined simply by political parties, by campaigning and elections. Those things tend to obscure the whole point of politics, which is something far more serious. Politics answers the key question of how we live, not just as individuals, but with each other. How do we organize ourselves to live in communities? Politics, in other words, is about governance. And the Bible has a very clear idea on the subject of governance. There is a single criterion for a just society in the Bible, and it all boils down to this. How does that society care for its most vulnerable members? In Bible speak, the widow, the orphan, the stranger. Political leaders, those who are elected to it, power, or those who usurp it, they're the ones who make the laws. They are the ones who raise and collect taxes to pay for social needs, like for widows and orphans, or they're the ones who refuse to do that. They decide where the money goes, whether to education or whether, say, the military. And the Bible, well, it cares about stuff like that. So yes, the Bible is full of politics. So return with me now to those thrilling days of yesteryear, to a book in the Bible that absolutely teems with politics. For in our continuing series here on Women in the Bible, we have now come to Deborah, and a story that plunges us into the political world of ancient Israel. The story of Deborah is found in the book of Judges, a very peculiar and really bloody book in the Bible, and also from a very distinctive period of governance in the history of Israel. But first, anybody remember that Mel Gibson movie, Maverick? And in it, he has this really great ironic line about the Indians being on our land when we got here. Well, after the exodus out of Egypt and the desert years and the death of Moses, the Hebrew people arrived in Canaan only to find other people living there. The book of Judges covers the roughly 400-year period from the conquest of Canaan to the establishment of hereditary kings. It was a chaotic time, marked by frequent upheavals and ongoing battles with the other people in the region. was also the time when Israel's 12 tribes were organized loosely into what's called the Tribal Confederacy. Rather than a centralized government, each tribe had its own leader called a judge, and the judges provided local leadership of a legal, military, and political nature. This function is not so different from that of a king, except on a crucial point. Kings are chosen by hereditary succession. Judges were called by God, making God the ultimate ruler of the people. There's a pattern in the book that gets repeated over and over. The people declare their allegiance to Yahweh. Then they slip and start worshiping the Canaanite god Baal. And the people then are oppressed, and they cry out to God, and God raises a hero who delivers them. Peace reigns again in the land, and then the cycle starts all over again. As one of those heroes, Deborah is like a triple whammy. She's a judge, a warrior, and a prophet. And this has bothered male interpreters for centuries, all of whom have tried to chip away at her authority. And they do it not just in their commentaries, but in their translations. When Deborah is first introduced, the grammatical structure identifies her as a woman of Lapidoth. The meaning of Lapidoth is torch. It is not a proper name anywhere in Hebrew. And yet, translators have unanimously decided that Deborah needs a husband, so they made it a proper name, translating the phrase woman of Lapidoth as wife of Lapidoth. Wife of Lapidoth, woman of torches. Wife of Lapidoth is much less threatening than that more literal translation, which declares Deborah to be a woman of torches. Guess which translation I prefer? But isn't this also more revealing of Deborah's character? She's a fiery woman, a woman whose light inflames Barak, inciting him to action. She's a woman who sparks resistance to oppression. Deborah herself doesn't do any actual fighting. Like Moses, she's not a battle commander. Deborah's role is to inspire, to assure, and to celebrate. Her weapon is her words. She calls Barak, proclaims God's presence, announces the victory, and memorializes it in song. Sisera's army, she proclaims, with its 900 chariots of iron, fell because a flash flood sent by God mired all those chariots in the mud. That's the whole formula for the book of Judges. Chaos reigns. God creates order out of chaos. Peace prevails, or, as the text here puts it, and the land had rest for 40 years. And then it begins all over again. We are living in a time of chaos. Political chaos. Environmental chaos. We might be forgiven for wishing that God would intervene Old Testament style with another flash flood and mire some of those modern chariots in mud. But we know that's not how it works. And we also know that armed rebellion isn't really an option. Even if it were, it's contrary to the commitments many of us have to nonviolence. So what are we left with? We are left with a woman who first and foremost hears a call from God and answers yes. She is a woman who then, metaphorically speaking, lights a fire, who uses words to inspire, who works within the range of relevant possibilities that are open to her, who teams collaboratively with others, and who then uses all of these means to bring down a tyrant. The Bible is filled with these stories. Stories of tyrants who one by one are brought down. The Bible is also filled with stories of empires that one by one rise and fall. Some of the stories are fantastic, more literature or allegory than history, but so many of these stories are political, because the Bible isn't the story of a single person, it's the story of a people. And people need a set of values to figure out how to live together in community. They need to figure out how to define power, who should have it, and how it should be wielded. They need to figure out how goods and services are produced and distributed, how disputes are settled, and whether the society should be organized for the few at the expense of the many, or whether it should be oriented towards some notion of the common good. In ancient Israel, the common good was baked into the covenant between God and God's people. The covenant itself is a relational document, and by the way, so are the Ten Commandments. Both spell out how people are to govern themselves, but then how they are to conduct themselves in family and communal life. Also, how they are to honor God. A little hint on that last one. They honor God not with pious words, but by how they treat each other. And you guessed it, how they treat the widow, the orphan, the stranger. What I love about the story of Deborah is that anyone can be like her. Maybe not raise an army, but any one of us can speak words of hope, of encouragement, of inspiration. We can be the spark that lights up some other person's life, that lights a candle in the dark. We can be torch bearers, whoever we are, wherever we are, whatever our situation. In the beginning, Genesis tells us, the Spirit of God moved over the face of the deep, and from out of primordial chaos, God called forth light. But creation didn't stop back then, and unfortunately, neither did chaos. But creation is ongoing, and the God who first created order out of chaos is always creating order out of chaos, is always calling us to what is possible, that one thing that we can do right now in this moment, no matter how dark or chaotic our times. In the midst of chaos, Deborah, the woman of torches, says, "Be the spark." And God says, "Let there be light."